This episode of CelloChat is brought to you by Carriage House Violins of Johnson String Instrument. Please visit us at www.carriagehouseviolins.com.
Okay, and we are live.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I am Michal Shein. I'm logging on from Boston, where it's a beautiful day today. Thank you so much, Cello Bello, for inviting me for this cello chat, which is geared to adult learners. I'm so excited for this series because, there's so many adult learners out there trying to play and trying to make it easy. And of course, for so many of you, I assume that playing the Bach suites is just this pinnacle. So what we're going to do today is I would love to share my approach to Bach with the way I approach it with my students and give you lots of tips of how to make it feel easy. These pieces are just so dear to our hearts, and we want to find ways to make it so that we can enjoy it. So what I'm gonna do is I'd love to sort of give you my approach to how I understand the prelude, which is a way also to approach most of the pieces, most of the movements in the Bach suites. And then we will sort of go back and give you lots of tips on how to practice so that it feels organic. We're feeling connected to the music, but also finding ways, again, ease is going to be sort of the name of the game today. So a word about editions, first of all. The edition that I use right here is the Baron Writer. This is what I recommend to all my students. It's a fabulous edition, and we're going to be sharing the PDF of this first prelude of the first suite, so that you can have it as a reference as I'm sort of talking. I love these editions because we don't have the original and there's been so many editions since, and this one's kind of consolidates everything that we know, and it's just so fabulous. So this is my trusted edition. You might be using it as well, so that's what we're going to be using. Now, of course, the other editions have a lot of different bowings, so you might see something new that I'm doing today that might interest you, might baffle you, but that's sort of the name of the game with these Bach suites, because we don't have the original manuscript. All right, so again, what I'd love to do is to start out by a musical understanding of this prelude, because you can't find ease in playing unless you have an idea of musically what's happening. And in Bach, what we find is in so many of the movements, we have a bunch of 16th notes. And there's a lot of things to consider in order to start to make sense of this music. We have to understand the structure. Is it a prelude like the first movement where it's sort of a fantasy land? Is it a dance? And if it's that dance, then what groove does it have? Is it in 2? Is it in 3? Is it in 4? Where's the strong beat? What is the harmony? What is the phrase length? Are there different voices, right? Like all these things are happening all at once. And we have to kind of break it down sort of, as I say, here before we get to it here, because otherwise it's a little bit like we're fishing in the dark. Yeah. So we're going to take the prelude of the first suite as an example of approach, and I think what you'll see is as I'm talking throughout that you will be able to apply a lot of these ideas to the other movements. And I really look forward to some questions at the end too, anything that I didn't get to. All right, so let's start out. So the prelude, we start in G major, yeah? And the whole journey sort of starts in G major, and we're going to be going to different places, and eventually we will make our way back. And it's very interesting to see always how Bach gets back to where he started, that home base. And it's very dramatic in this prelude. So we start out with 4 chords, right? So, and this is so typical of Bach. He has, each bar has 1 chord. So next is, and then we relaxed. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna be kind of playing the prelude, stopping to make you notice things, and noticing some things that are happening because they come up all over, again, in all the suites. And we have to understand these things because they determine how we're going to be practicing, yeah? So we start out. Now I'm stopping on that note because the ear expects in bar 4 a pattern, right? We expect. We expect that note. Now this is something I work a lot on my students, noticing notes that we expect and we don't get. So what happens at the end of bar 4 is he changes the pattern in order to then bring us somewhere else. So what happens here? That F sharp leads us into the next bar. Where are we? We're in G major. So very quickly, we started on G major, and then we made it to D major. Just by opening that 1 door, that F sharp brought us to D major in bar 7. And so we're in D major for a while, so we've now come away from our home base. So in bar 7 we have sort of a dark E minor sound here. Where are we going? Back to D major. Now I'm going to stop right there because the ear expects D, right? We think we're in D major. Great. Let me play that again, but now with a note that actually follows, which is a surprise to the listener. That note is weird. So another thing I tell my students is to notice these moments, these musical moments where the listener, we sort of have to pretend that the audience doesn't know what's coming. Yeah, we practice so much that we take for granted what we're playing. Yeah, but we have to realize that many people might be hearing this for the first time, and certainly when Bach wrote it, no one had heard it, right? So when he writes, that G sharp is strange, and it's going to determine how we're going to practice that. Now, where are we? A minor. Now we're almost in E minor. So we had started G major home, then we went to D major, now we're in A minor, a little E minor, and now we're not sure what's going to happen. And remember, we're always trying to get back to G major. So what happens here? Bar 15. We're getting closer. G major. Now I'm going to stop right there. The ear expects G, right? We think we had started in G and we think we're going to get it. I love bar 19. Bar 19, once again, is and then what does he do? Ooh, another place that we have to notice because the listener doesn't expect it. We as cellists that have played it 1,000 times, we know it's coming, but the audience doesn't know it's coming. And so it's an interesting place. And so what happens here? Ooh, it's sort of going down into the abyss. So now, where are we? It's confusing. We have this fermata. What's going to happen next? So this is where Bach is kind of veering all over the place. We're going to get very chromatic. Eventually, we know we're going to get back to that G. But when is it going to happen? So we have this stop. Now. Ooh, another strange note. That's going to very important. We're going to determine again how we practice this. Now we're going to notice these bottom Ds. Another weird place. Where are we? D. D major. But we have to get to G. So next note, this C that comes is weird because we thought we're in D major. In D major we would have a C sharp, right? So this tells us something else is going to happen. Maybe we're going to get back to that G major at some point. Go down, or to A. Now he takes this A and puts it on top, and then he has this inner little line. Quiet. Or we go higher, or back down. Where are we? Now we go. Now we finally get that G. Finally, we're back to G major that we've been waiting, I feel like, since bar 19. Yeah, when we thought we were going to get there and we got that weird C sharp, and now we finally get it. End of story. So that's how I conceive of the prelude, and without getting into hopefully too much harmony for you, that's kind of the structure. And so we want to have these things in mind as we approach it and as we think about, okay, how am I going to play this so it sounds flowy and easy and all of these things. So now we're going to sort of, I'm going to hopefully bombard you with some with tips about how to not only practice this movement, but hopefully, as I said before, will apply everywhere. So going back to the beginning, if you're with your PDF or with your own Bach edition, whatever it is, let's look at the beginning, because this type of bowing and fingering, all this happens all the time in Bach. So when I see something like this that requires the bow to be doing a lot of different things, the way I teach it with my students is say, let's separate. Let's say goodnight to the bow hand, and let's just practice the left hand. So often left hand pits practice is very useful. So like here we have chords, right? So if we practice, switch it, pits, then next one. And important to set up your left hand before you actually pits. Okay, so let's say we do that for a while. We practice this pattern so that the left hand knows what it's doing, because ideally when you start something like this, you don't want to be thinking about the left hand. You mostly want to be connected here. So once you practice this left hand combo, then maybe you haven't done this, but this is an amazing practice tool. Practice the right hand only. No left hand. Figure out, what is the bow doing? Well, we have 3-note slur if you're using this bowing, which I recommend. We have 3-note slur. And I'm going to bring it down my screen a little bit so you can see my bridge. Maybe I'll switch back a little bit. There we go. We have 3-note slur, a separate one, and then a cross. Right? And it happens for 4 bars. So if your brain already knows that the pattern is the same in the bow in terms of which strings, that already helps the cause of playing it with ease. So practicing 3-note slur, we want to think about a couple of things. We want to be thinking about our weight in our arm, getting a nice juicy sound on that G string, and then we want to be able to arc the bow and using the arm as kind of the conductor of the train. All right, then we have this single note. Now, what I often see that happens with students is that they playing Bach and they will often end up here. It's not very comfortable. It doesn't have a lot of ease to be playing near the tip. So whenever you have a 3+1 bowing in Bach, I recommend taking that last one and bringing you back to the frog. So now I'm golden, because otherwise I'm going to do a 3 in 1s for a while, and you'll see what happens if I don't go back to the frog. Ay, ay, ay. Now I'm here. All right, so I'm going to go back. And then we have the cross. Okay, so once we have that and we've practiced that for a while, just the open strings makes it so much easier. Then you bring the back, maybe you pits again, just to remember. And then my trick is think like 30% here, but 70% here. So much of ease in Bach comes of being really connected with the bow. All right, so if we go, for the most part, I'm thinking about my bow. I'm not thinking about my left hand. So this is a really, really useful tip. Whenever you feel uncomfortable, check in with your bow. Does your bow know what it's doing? Take away the left hand, and it's such a great exercise too. It makes you so much smarter, I find, to figure out what open strings you're doing. All right, so now let's move to some left hand tips. Again, for ease. We have a lot of shifting in Bach, so much shifting. So here's one tip that you might find useful. This is in bar 5. We have the following. We have this shift if you're using that fingering, okay? And if you're not, I'm sure at some point, somewhere else you're using it. This is where I use guide note practice. So practice the shifting note in the position that normally it would be like this, B, with the third finger. Do it a few times. Now see if you can switch it up and play that B with a 1. But already playing it with 3 gives your brain and your muscles a reference. That's very useful guide note practice. All right, now the next bar has the next tip. that I think you'll find useful. One of the reasons we get very tired playing Bach is we start using too much energy. And part of that energy is from lifting fingers, left hand fingers, when we don't need to. So for example, and this is bar 6, tunnel. So keep as many notes as you can down and just pop up for an open string to reduce energy. Yeah, so here. Your brain will be like wanting you to do. That's very tiring and it's not easy. So as much as you can in places where you can create tunnels, way to go. Okay, so we talked about some guide note practice. We talked about tunnels. The next 2 bars actually a fantastic example of another way to practice ease. So this is bar 9 and 10. I'm going to turn down the AC for a second, just a second. It's getting a little chilly in here. In Bach, we see, as I said before, a slew of 16th notes. And sometimes you think, well, like I'll look in the beginning of the bar and the end of the bar, and that's probably the end of the phrase. But oftentimes a bar line will come in the middle of a phrase. And if we don't see that, then we start practicing phrases cut off. And that creates muscle memory and again stops that ease. So let's look at bar 9, which is this. Right, that. So we have these mini phrases. Next, little one, then a scale. Now that scale has a bar line smack in the middle. Yes, this one. Bar line. So for my students, I put a lot of commas in Bach because they're not there and there's so many little phrases. And so to find ease, if you want to play, you need to know that that's one phrase, regardless of that bar line that's kind of stopping your brain. Then we have another one. That's another mini phrase. And then the next one. So as much as you can, practice by phrases. And when you restart in your practice, don't restart in the middle of a phrase. Wherever the phrase is, start in the beginning of the phrase. You have to feel that flow. All right. So now, I want to jump to the second page because therein lies a lot of our issues. Actually, before we do that, there's one more spot on the first page that I want to talk about, which is when we think about ease, we have to think about what is our musical intention, right? And we have to not only know here what we want to do musically, but we have to be then planful about it. So just because we kind of feel something here or here doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be able to channel it through the instrument, because we're doing something kind of technical, and we need to figure out how we're going to do that. So here's an example of a place like that, which is actually just where we were. You know this place here. That. Now that G sharp, there's a musical decision to be made. Do we want that loud? Do we want that soft? We could do, right? We could make that soft or more. Whatever it is, take some planning. And when you plan, things will feel easier. So when we think about dynamics, we think, well, there's only a certain amount that the left hand will be able to do. It's actually a lot more in the right hand. So in order to, let's suppose we're going to do a crescendo. I might practice with just my right hand to figure out if I'm doing what I want. Well, that didn't really sound like a crescendo. So I need to figure something out. Well, I might need to use more bow, right? There, right? And then I can start playing with more weight. On that note, I could come up a little bit. So then I'll try to open strings. And then I have it. So, and now that's more effective. It's more planful, and I'll feel a lot easier doing it because I've had an idea and then I figured it out with the bow. Make sense? Okay, let's move on to the second page because that's where we have so many issues. All right, here we go. Sorry, I'm just making sure that I'm getting through everything. All right, here we go. On the second page, speaking of bow planning, we often have places where we feel awkward in Bach. For example, bar 22, you remember that stop after we went down into the abyss? Oftentimes I hear students end up kind of like this here. Or run out and it feels very awkward. So this is where, again, bow planning and bow choreography is very useful. So you know how we talked about that 3-in-1 bowing? We sometimes get 1 in 3 in Bach, sometimes all over the place. So I find it very helpful to pull on that 1 and then come back on the 3. So here we have 1 and then 3. Right? If I don't pull on that first one, that feels very, already I feel tension. So pull on the first, go. Now the last one is interesting. I want the most bow on the third note here. But my brain will tell me to use all of my bow on the first one. And then I'm stuck. So I'm going to practice. I think I'm going to start from here. So it's kind of amazing to think that in order to have a lot of ease in Bach, these are actually a lot of the things that have to happen in your practice is a lot of bow planning because it won't just happen. The bow doesn't know what to do. Sometimes it does and it works out and that's awesome. But oftentimes we have to teach the bow what to do along with our musical idea. Yeah, so this is a really good place for that. Now I feel in control. I feel ease. I don't feel stressed out about being at the tip because I figured out in the bow how I'm going to distribute each note. All right, so now let's keep going to our famous bar 24. We also have it in bar 26. These gnarly places that happen in Bach where we get a lot of shifting and chromatics. We see that throughout the suites. So I'm going to give you now some left-hand tips for those sorts of places of how to practice. So when you have spots in Bach where, again, you have maybe chromatic notes or difficult fingering, take out the bowing. So let's do it separate bows. Let's give the left hand a chance to really find these notes. I like to double note. So this is, bar 24. And that E flat. You might be using different fingerings there. You know, you can try mine. Regardless, repeat each note twice. Then you can repeat it 3 times. times, 4 times, can go back to 3, go back to 2. It's giving a chance for your left hand to be practicing those notes. Then, along with that, I like to do groupings. So I'll go 4 plus 1 to practice transition. Still separate bows, so like this. Next group. Then once that feels really good, I'll transition to 8 plus 1. And then I'll start adding bowing. And then once that feels really good, here's the trick. You must go back and you must stitch it, because your brain is going to want to just keep going, be like, it's a done deal. But no, you have to reinforce. So go back a little bit, and I have all my students just go back a little bit and stitch what you just did. So I'll go back just 8 notes. And see if it sticks. And if it doesn't stick, then you go back to separate. Maybe you try the next day, whatever it is. But that's a really fabulous way to work these places and to find ease in these very notey places. Now, if we jump to bar 26, which is the next one, we have this. That little place. So this is classic place for students. The first 5 notes. That G major arpeggio. First of all, it helps to even know that that's a G major arpeggio, just for your ear, for your brain. Guide note. Do it in first position. That kind of practice. Then we have an extension. We have so many of these all over Bach. I like to do them out of order. It helps the left hand practice it in a different way. So I might go, or just in different combos, helps the left hand learn stuff. And then this one too. You could combine them. So doing things out of order is also very useful in chunks where you're in one position. Okay. All right. So now I have a few more tips, and then we're going to open it up for questions. You know how we got down to D major in bar 29, and then we had these runs? All right. So when in Bach you have slurs with lots of notes, yeah, those are often very challenging because they feel awkward. You're concerned about the left hand. This is not going right often. Often we get that kind of sound. We get frustrated. We stomp our feet, whatever it is. We go get a drink. Here's a way you could practice those sorts of places. Let's suppose that you've practiced the left hand separately, you've doubled notes, you've done groupings, okay, without the actual slur. So I'm going to suppose that the left hand is feeling pretty confident about the notes. Okay, so here's a way that maybe you haven't practiced that is very effective, and it's what I call add-on. So start the first note, add one more, keep going, more, keep going, and then by doing add-on practice, you're teaching the bow how to distribute notes. And it's very, very effective. Yeah. Now the next one starts up bow, so you're gonna have to start up bow. You get the idea. Very useful for places where you have lots of notes in one slur. Okay, now we come to this famous place. That little guy. So here we have to, first of all, classic place where we have 2 voices, right? So to find ease, we have to know that there's 2 voices going on. The A, not so important. We're going to keep hearing it. We have a melody underneath going. So let's practice just the melody. Echo. Again. And it goes up. More. One there. So you notice that I put little commas too, right, in the many phrases. All right, once you're very comfortable playing that melody, we got to practice the bow stroke, which is the same for the whole thing, right? Now, I do it at the tip, up, down. You might be used to doing it down, up, okay? I do it up, down. I find doing string crossing, especially on the top strings, I find doing up bow on the bottom string, I find that more comfortable because I get to kind of dip down. So when you have a bow stroke like this in Bach, we want to keep in mind a few things, again, for ease. The thumb has to be very flexible. If your thumb is locking throughout, you're going to get very tired. And you're going to seize up and forget about ease, right? So thumb, as you're working these circles, has to be pliable, has to be able to be moving. Same with the fingers. Yeah, I like to use long fingers for the bottom string and shortened. Yeah, it's a kind of a special technique. So this has to be loose, and the arm though too has to be dipping. So it can't be stationary. So putting that together, and I dip down for the D, but I try to not come up too much for the A either, right? Because then I'm going to get tired. So practice just the open strings, getting that motion. Anytime something feels awkward, feels tight, just do the open strings. Teach your right hand what to do. And then, once you then are feeling, more or less comfortable, we put the melody. Now, as much as we can doing tunnels, we talked about that earlier, that also will be less tiring. So often I'll see students when they first learn of course, it makes sense. The brain will tell you to go like this. Sorry. Because we're so conditioned every time we have an open string to open the hand. But we're actually losing a lot of energy that way. So as much as you can, keeping the fingers on the string will make it easier. So I try to keep that D string down as much as I can, throughout this whole business. Then when it flips on its head, and then we have this open D string, and then this chromatic. Oh, and I should have mentioned, sorry, one thing. How you get into this thing is very important. You have 3-note slur. Get to the tip on those. Bow choreography. And then conversely, when you come out of it, let's say, come back to the front. Now, here I can't keep my fingers down because I need to play an open D string. But once I'm on the A, I'll keep it down. All of this conserves energy and actually makes the playing easy. Yeah? Ish. It's still pretty complicated what we do here. Now, when you have chromatic lines, throughout Bach in certain places, not too many, but when it happens, one tip is to keep track of your position. So for example, here I'm in first, second, right? And then if you look at the PDF actually that I shared, you'll see little brackets there. Then second, then fourth. Organizing in your head the notes that way, rather than thinking individual notes, also creates more ease. So I'm thinking second position, half, second, fourth. Yeah. Now, to end, before we get to questions, the last 4 bars, they're like the most exciting and the most stressful sometimes because we're hyped up. We have this, this run, but then we want also the end to feel really easy and luscious and organic and all these things. So how do we practice? Going back to first pizzicato practice. That's what happens in that bar. Next bar, right? Now, second to last bar, some people do 3/4. I like to do 2/3. I have a small hand, so this, for my hand, it feels easier to cross this way than this way. My pinky's short, but you can try both ways. So let's suppose we had the pits practice. Now it's really the bow, actually, again, that we need to practice there. So we have 1 separate 3. So remember, we're going to travel on that 1 and then go back. So we have that and then separate. So adding to the 2. Makes it a little bit easier. Yeah, now that I've sort of analyzed this. Now, lastly, we have the chord. Now, chords, a word about chords. I think that one of the reasons they feel hard is because visually, you see like 3 or 4 notes stacked on top of each other. And so that sends a signal to the brain to go, right? Everything together. Where actually we have separate tracks, kind of, if you think of your strings, separate tracks. And it's actually not what the bow does at all. We go in a curve. So if we take the last chord, we have this, and then we have this. Now we're in the middle of the bow, right? So we want to, first of all, know here that what the bow is going to do on that last chord is very different than what it looks like visually, first of all. Then, my last 2 tips. Left hand first. Set up your left hand. Has to be there already. And then practice with your bow what you want to do. So let's suppose you're going to do 1 and 3. Practice that a few times. All right, now I'm going to place my left hand and go. Or I might go. Or I might go. Whatever it is. But I'll practice it just with my right hand to find that ease, right? That's the name of the game. So I'm going to open up the chat here and start answering some questions. All right. So from Rosie, so helpful. I'm so glad, Rosie, that this is helpful for you. We have a question from Cello Bella's partner at Together with Classical, which is, if I had to introduce classical music to someone for the first time, how would you do it? What piece would you suggest? What a great question, and what a hard question. Gosh, I mean, I feel like if you just played this prelude to anybody, what's so amazing about it is that we know that it's, one of the most amazing pieces in classical music, but you also don't need to know anything about classical music to enjoy it and to feel it. And so that's a good one to explain what classical music is. For me, classical music is music that, for the audience, makes them feel something that sometimes they can't put their finger on. And there's many pieces that evoke, obviously, all classical music pieces evoke some sort of feeling. But I might do like a top 10 from Bach to maybe a Shostakovich symphony to a Schubert lieder, because also classical music runs the gamut of just, gosh, so many styles. So that's my probably not very good answer, but I really think that the prelude would be an amazing place to start. Okay, from Chris, do you have any tips on coordinating the left and right hand under pressure Oh, but that's such a great question. Any mental preparation tips to keep the nerves in check, especially when performing in front of people? That's a great question. So I find the way, for me, that I calm nerves is, it goes back to what I was talking about, of the thinking 30% here and 70% here. The more connected I am to the physical touch of the bow and the string, the more I feel grounded. And so I do a lot of practice of just right hand. I'll do a lot of practice where I'll slow things down considerably and sort of be working in the bowings almost slow motion, especially right before a concert, doing a lot of slow motion work in the bow. I find that that's very effective in the concert, because if I feel connected here, this calms down, and then this is in control. Now there's spots where there's coordination that we need to work. Sometimes I'll play a mental trick of thinking in the concert in slow motion in the bow. So I almost think that the bow is like a little bit behind the left hand, or I think of playing like 98% slower with my bow during the concert. I find that very useful, very, very useful. Did I answer the question? How much speed? Yeah, and then there's when you're practicing coordination also, a very good practice tip is practicing. Let's suppose we have just a fast scale. One way to practice coordination is to, this is what I call Velcro the string, catch it, set the next note, catch the string again, and go. Feel that connection. In doing that, you are teaching the hand to be coordinated. Next. That kind of practice where you're doing left hand first and then the right hand, those will also help in concert. I'm getting a question from a student of mine. That's funny. I'm getting it on my phone. He's asking, does the modern bow affect how you approach phrasing, particularly repetition of notes at the end of the initial phrases? So if I'm using my Baroque bow, Baroque bow helps me especially down bows and up bows, because of the weight of the bow. I find it easier to do things that easier, for example, even to do the beginning of this suite. The bow is lighter. There's certain things that it kind of like when you play with a Baroque bow, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Now it's actually not as hard. So I recommend to everybody out there, if you can get a hold of a Baroque bow and play, especially Bach or any of the Baroque repertoire, you'll see just how much easier it is. Yeah, and that part of our challenge in finding ease in Bach is that we're working with this modern, the strings and the bow and, these things that it wasn't meant for. Yeah. All right. So, Diego is asking, he plays the play. So for the prelude, I usually play it in a bow line for measure. So I think Diego is saying, how do we play? So, doing all of it in one. I think you can make it effective. I think the bowing that especially Baron Reiter has, and if we look at the Anna Magdalena manuscript, this is a bit more in line, I think, with Baroque style of what they would have done. But I also feel like, you know what, make it your own, you know. If it's effective, it's effective. That said, I think it's really a great idea to experiment with different bowings, and to, at the same time, do consult the Baron writer, because I think in terms of historical practice, I think it has a lot to say and for us, you know, to think about. Okay, can you show how to practice the fast ricochet? Yes, okay. So a ricochet is when we have notes in one bow. We don't find this bowing in Bach. This is more of a modern type of skill. So we have to, when we're working at different bow strokes, we have to figure out whether a bowing starts from the string or starts from the air. Now, a ricochet is one that starts from the air, yeah? And then it gets added. So, as always, I practice first the right hand. And figure out how many drops I'm going to do. And I have to start figuring out also the height will affect it. How much hair on the string you're going to have. All these things we have to kind of experiment with, and how much pressure we apply once we arrive to the string. All these factors. I could talk about that for a long time. I see more questions coming in. I'll just say doing it separately is very, very useful. Very useful to do your ricochet just on the open string first, to understand what this hand has to do. Yeah. Okay. Next string, my D string is rather muted in the upper register as compared to an open A. How can I manage that sound difference in measure 33 and 35? Great question. Yeah, so Anna's talking about this section when it gets higher. So here's the trick. When you're playing up high on the D string, where it is muted, you're absolutely right. It doesn't sound the same as, right? I find that I have to move this bow further down, much further down. Because, you know, I find I'm sort of compressing the string, it's kind of going down, and then it kind of will go back up over the string, and I want to find this place where it's kind of going back up, and for me it's about here. So if you notice, for that part I actually play quite close to the bridge. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit now, but that's what I would do. I would drive that bow, even if it feels exaggerated. Find with your cello where it sounds just better. Yeah. All right. Annalisa is asking, in movements with repeats, I love this question, how do you go about making a second repeat different than the first to move forward instead of dulling the audience? Fantastic question. So yes, so in all the dances in Bach, we have repeats. And I think it behooves us to do something different, because why is the repeat even there? So we can make certain decisions. For example, a classic one, you might decide to start softer. So let's take, I don't know, the minuet of the first suite. So it starts out. So I might start, right? I might start less. Or I might start more. But then I find that if you think about like how the first halves, for example, end, let's suppose on the second half, on the end of the repeat in that first half, you open it up a little bit, that then can transition you into the second half a little bit more open. So I experiment trying different things on the repeat. So the first time I might go soft. The first time I might start soft, but then on the repeat go bigger. Those will start giving me clues about how then I want to transition into the second part. So if I started, very big on the repeat, and then I go on to the second part, I might keep it open, I might go down. So those are things that can kind of help us, ideas, yeah. Yeah, so, I think of, for example, I'm trying to, yeah, even in this music, I like to kind of try things that might feel weird to me, or, out of the box, just to have some variation. Yeah, it's a great question. I love that. Okay, I hope I haven't missed questions. What advice do you have for practicing on days you don't feel like? This is another question from Rosie. Great question. Well, the fact is, we don't feel like practicing every day. And so I think, first of all, it's very important to honor that there will be days we don't feel like practicing. And that's okay. That's okay. We're not going to bring the same enthusiasm from day to day. On days that I don't feel like practicing, I'll play different tricks. Sometimes I really don't feel like practicing, and I'll say to myself, all right, open your case and sit in the chair. And I set a timer for 10 minutes. This is a great friend of mine, Kate, gave me that tip, and I said, I'll put 10 minutes and see what happens. And oftentimes, once 10 minutes have passed, I kind of start practicing. And sometimes if I don't, then at least I spend 10 minutes. Other times when I don't feel like practicing, I might say, all right, I'm going to just today play something that I love, that I'm not going to practice, but I'm just going to play through something just to have contact with my instrument. And so maybe I'm working on something and I'm not playing Bach. I might just play Bach, or I might play something else to just get me playing. Other times I'll make myself a very detailed plan. It sort of depends on the mood that I'm in. Whether I need a very detailed plan to just get going, or I need something very free. But I try to at least say to myself, how will I feel after I practice? Will I feel happy that I did it? Will I feel disappointed? Would I feel regret? Probably I won't feel regret. So those are sort of mantras that I use to get myself in that chair. All right, so last few questions here. What's on my music stand right now? Well, right now it's Bach. But other things that are on my stand are I've been playing some wonderful collaboration with Adam Levine, a guitarist. So I had the Vivaldi sonatas on there. I also have the Casado suite. Yesterday we had a concert with my students, and I had all of their rep going. So it's really fun to have so many different things on there. All right, so let's see. I'm going to take some another question here. Is there a particular practice method that you swear by that has remained of constant value for you over the years? Yeah. I would say, for me, what's been most effective is practice planning. I have, I don't know, I can't tell you how many practice notebooks I have where either I am doing time blocking with my practice, saying this time block I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that, then I'm going to do this. I find that very effective because when I sit down, I don't want to think about what should I do. I find that that is very blocking for me. And I want to sit down and get to work. And so I found it very effective to have these practice schedules. That's first of all. In addition to practice schedules, what I have found very, very effective in my practice throughout is to have another notebook where I jot down observations. I find that the act of writing while I'm practicing makes me a better teacher to myself, makes me very mindful of what I'm doing, makes me actually get to solutions much faster. It makes me, it really helps actually to not be judgmental and not be negative, because I'm observing. I'm trying to observe all the time of what I'm doing and what I can improve. And if I have a negative thought, I'll write it down and say, oh, that's interesting, I've had a negative thought. So those two things I found really, really, really effective. Let's see, to end, is there anything we haven't discussed you feel is vital to productive creative practice? Well, I think actually it's what I just said, which is I think the best thing that you can do for yourself is to not be judgmental. Easier said than done, right? But the idea that we are coming to this with joy, we're coming to this because it makes us feel, it moves us. And if, as much as we can, if we can approach playing and practicing as observations, it's very useful. It's very useful because we can get rid of a lot of negative talk that happens. Why aren't you doing this? And why are you not in this place? And why are you not playing this? All this noise. It's just noise that doesn't serve us. And so I find that that for me is one of the most useful things that I can do in my practice, is to be an observer and to honor the practice with positivity and self-compassion, because what we do is hard and a lot of people don't do it because it's hard. And so if you are even attempting to play, any instrument, I think it's an amazing thing. And it makes us grow, and it gives us so much joy. And we want to kind of live in that space as much as we can. So that's what I have for you today. I hope it was useful. I want to just thank Cello Bello for having an adult learner series. I think it's a wonderful idea. I hope it was useful. Please, let me know if you have more questions. I'm sure Cello Bello can get you to me. I'm always happy to just help others in this thing that we do. Thank you so much. I wish for you a wonderful, wonderful day, wonderful practice with Bach, and thank you so much.